Well, welcome, gentlemen. I don't do big intros, but everybody can see who you are, and I'm delighted that you're all here because we have a great representation of the airline industry. So let's get stuck in. Just briefly, and I'll start with you, Juan. What's one AI development that you were excited about 18 months ago that turned out to be harder than expected? And just keep it to a couple of sentences, if you would.
Perfect. So this is something actually we're working on right now. It is on AI, and I think it's going to be very, very important to what's about to happen. So probably most of you have experienced a very large increase in look-to-book ratios, right? When you talk to an LLM, somebody comes to ChatGPT or to Claude, and they have an intent to make a trip. They will see, they will send a query to the LLM, a prompt, and they will say, I want to go to Barcelona on a certain date. Right? The LLM is just going to do whatever they want to do. It's going to launch 30, 40 queries to something that before you could accomplish in 1 or 2 queries, right? So we're seeing that skyrocketing look-to-book ratios and hosting costs. So we are taking that approach, and we're saying, hey, what's our moat? We're sitting in an immense amount of data, right? And we believe the way to approach this is to an intelligence layer that sits between those LLMs, maybe your own agent tools using OpenAI or Anthropic, and then creating that LLM with an intelligence layer to find out what's real intent to travel versus what is just like vague answers on when is better to travel, what are the best destinations, right? So we're creating pre-computed servers of data to be able to entertain and guide the end user into building their trip, and only open it to those more deterministic queries when we know for sure the zero moment of truth when the end user is going to book should call the airline inventory. I think we could add a lot of value as a GDS in that aspect, rather than just building an MCP and giving it to somebody, right?
And we'll come back to your intelligence layer a little bit later in the conversation. David, what's one AI development that you found, maybe 18 months ago that you thought about, but it's actually proved a lot harder than you thought?
So our business is about building journeys, so connecting journeys. And we've done that with brute force in the past, and adding AI into the mix, being intelligent about that. We probably thought that'd be super easy, and yeah, turns out it wasn't. But we got there.
Yeah, nice. Tanner, same question.
I think just to kind of switch it up a little bit is I think I was really excited for trying to understand the LLM journey into people coming direct to the website. And what we found is actually the opposite, obviously, as all of the LLMs have focused, obviously, on drawing users. There's a lot of ambiguity in terms of what they're actually searching there, and then connecting into, once they've made a decision of intent, coming to your website. So it's still trying to understand what's really happening in that forefront before they actually get to your website, and kind of what you were mentioning.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody really understands that. We're all sort of struggling with that a bit right now. Sticking with you for a minute, Tanner, where in the booking journey would you say that AI specifically has moved the needle at this point?
Yeah, I think it's, there's a couple different stages. So, we use our chatbot as, a way that we can actually try to get guests to understand our policies, procedures, especially as a low-cost carrier, and to be able to self-serve in many ways. But I think for me, obviously, from the e-commerce side, I think it's always a little bit more sexy, is really around the personalization and understanding from the inspiration and discover side of the house. And so I think the big challenge is how we haven't had the opportunity to really, truly kind of understand when people are interacting with us. We can't still in the LLMs, but when people are interacting with us, what they're truly trying to do, the types of travelers they are, so we can better personalize even our emails and our push notifications. And we're seeing, absolutely, positive engagement there that's magnitudes above what we expected from a personalization perspective, which is great.
Do you see a sort of, what's the ceiling for personalization and hyper-personalization? Because we've talked about it for so long, and now it seems really within our grasp, but there must be only so far you can push it.
Yeah, when you think about it, everybody talks about dynamic pricing. You obviously can't dynamically price on personal characteristics of an individual, and nor should you, in terms of that. But when you think about actually just trying to put the right product in front of a guest or try to talk to them, you have to be really cautious. We kind of talk about it as, looking at a business traveler or somebody like that can look very much like a last-minute booker of somebody who has to go for a funeral. So you have to be very, very thoughtful around the messaging that you send and around how you try to understand profiles, holistically over time. So you have a lot more understanding, obviously, for those in your loyalty club and those who are, repeat travelers and those types of things. I think the ceiling for that is making sure that you're not getting to a point where you're becoming so personalized that when you misunderstand the intent, you've now made it more of a friction journey for that guest.
Right.
And I think that's why you have to still have your core product offering, let's say your core bundles. Everybody talks about personalized bundles and those items. You still have to have those kind of core bundles and those pieces to make sure that guests who understand that and are expecting those sit right alongside a personalized offer. Because otherwise, you can create friction if you get it wrong. They're saying, I want something else, and I can't give it to them.
David, you sort of have a unique perspective because you sit between the distribution layer and the kind of customer-facing, e-commerce layer. So what do you think is the gap between what airlines think AI is doing for the customer experience versus, what the data is actually showing?
Well, I suppose, it's kind of like you said, Tanner. You can't really see how customers are interacting with the airline. I think the point is that, this discovery and planning phase is moving into LLMs to some extent. Probably my parents are not planning that way, but probably my generation and below. And I think that's the whole point, is you're not really thinking, you're maybe thinking less, I'd like to go with this airline. You're thinking, I'd like to go anywhere for, a beach in France. And you sort of, the options that you have in front of you, making it easier to figure out which of those options you get to choose. I think there is a bit of a gap there because, obviously an airline doesn't want to become sort of a nameless brand. That's the opposite of the point. But I think that is something that airlines will have to learn how to adapt to once we get into further and further into the discovery and planning phase within LLMs.
You touched on the intelligence layer, Juan, and you're by no means the only one in the industry talking about GDS being the intelligence layer. Meta search engines are also talking about becoming the intelligence layer. What would you say that being that intelligence layer means for an airline, and what's the time frame, do you think, that we're talking about?
We're working on prototypes right now, so it's a reality. It's just about how good is that layer, right? Because we're sitting on a massive amount of data, MIDT data, ATPCO data, air shopping data. So I could already play with an LLM, giving them that kind of pre-computed data, responding under a millisecond or in milliseconds, and being able to give them much better data than the one they're using right now, screen scraping websites, right? So I think this is a reality. I think this is we're in MVP prototype mode right now. So it's just about those modules of information. It's all about how much data are you feeding and the feedback loops for the intelligence layer to get better and better and better. So we're starting. It's just a matter of getting it better there. And I think the only point where you're going to see this skyrocketing or not is how much trust do we have on LLMs. Right? Today, you will trust an agent on a TMC to book for you. You might not even want to touch it. You trust them, right? Today, you might not trust an LLM because when it comes to putting your credit card, it might hallucinate. I think it will come to a point where we're going to go past that timeline, and it's all going to be automated. They're going to know everything about you. Airlines, travel agencies are going to give them all their CRMs, and they're going to say, just book it for me. Mm-hmm. I know you know me very well.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, though, I think when you're looking at just in an actual LLM, like when you're using Perplexity or Gemini or ChatGPT or the others, the problem that we have fundamentally is that, obviously within the industry, there's very clear definitions, guides, and other items. When you're using LLMs and they're not today doing kind of what Google has in the past, and let's say, kind of accrediting this as a better source of truth than Reddit, you tend to find that there is a lot of confusing information that can occur to a guest just by the means of that coming up. And I think that's the important barrier is especially when you've got those types of agents in that scenario, is how do you bring that back to the end guest as well if they're not booking through the agency or those types of pieces, that they know that they can trust that information? Because we look at this a lot when we talk about how do we go through prompts and looking at Profound or the other, all of the different LLM monitoring things that you can do. You see that there's absolutely misinformation that's occurring because these are old training data sets.
Definitely, there is, and I think the further you get into that, of like trying to actually plan stuff, not just getting a suggestion of something.
Yeah.
Like actually, I do this all the time with like trying to build sort of complex journeys, and it's more like, yeah, you can probably find this on BA.com, and that's not the information you're looking for. That's not the structured data that you're looking for. And the problem with this also is that a lot of this data is proprietary. It sits, inside walls that the LLMs don't have access to.
So, Tana, how meaningful is this repositioning, this reframing of the GDSs to an airline, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously coming from the low-cost carrier side, I think you and I talked a little bit about this, is that I actually really like NDC. I think that what it enables for us, particularly on the bundle side and being able to put right products out there is absolutely huge to make sure that particularly all the different types of items that we have, anybody can access those to sell those to their individual guests, no matter the channel that they choose to come from. So for me, I think it's a game changer in terms of just having kind of standard fare filings and whatever I can kind of shove into a GDS. These are absolutely things that are value accretive for both the agencies that use these channels as well as individuals to make sure that they get the right product that they want. So for me, I couldn't be more of a supporter of those types of standards that allow me as a more unique retailer in the marketplace, and I think more, let's call it traditional airlines have come towards this way too, to be able to sell what guests are desiring.
Again, David, from your position in the middle of the sort of distribution and the kind of customer facing, what do you think are the, where's the hype versus the reality? Where are the bottlenecks when it comes to AI? Because we read so many reports, and we airlines are called laggards all the time, and it's not necessarily fair, but they do operate these huge and complex operations. So where's the hype? Where's the reality?
Well, obviously there's still a lot of hype, and we don't know where this will end up. I think there's probably more hype than can be supported in reality, at least now. But what we know, like you said earlier, I mean, things that, and to your first question, things that were not possible in AI 18 months ago are now just run of the mill. So this will continue and at an ever increasing pace, as we know. I think the reality is that the planning stage or the discovery phase, like I said earlier, is moving into that space. Now, the hype of, I leave my credit card and all my things with an agent, that might be a little bit out there. Question is always going to be, is OpenAI going to have, like somebody said, I was on a panel a couple weeks ago, is OpenAI going to have 1,500 supplier relationships? Probably not. So somebody's going to have to, somebody still is going to have to be the sort of intermediary there. But the discovery phase moves away. So from the kind of that sort of layer at the top in meta search, for example, things like Google Flights and stuff, people might, and they're moving, but people might start in very different ways discovering what they'd like to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to just kind of segue on that. I think for me, it goes beyond that. I actually think that the onus kind of goes towards the individual, and I think what you see with OpenClaw and obviously, kind of the personal agents, personal assistants, whatever you want to call them, really kind of shifts that back to, in some ways, the consumer saying, okay, hey, what do I trust? And this is them enabling their level of confidence with their own agent. I mean, if you haven't played with OpenClaw and those types of, let's kind of call it AI agents that are your own, it magnifies the potential exponentially of what you can do as a guest. And to your point earlier, magnifies the volume of people looking at your website exponentially. Like, hey, tell me what a great deal is, and it goes and scrapes 1,000 things. But I think that onus is on them, and I think it's also, by the way, there's going to need to be very, very clear, payment mechanisms that come into the marketplace to say, okay, hey, I'm willing to do this, but these are, virtual credit cards will become even more ubiquitous for those one-time transactions with limits, whereas a few suppliers offer that today. It's going to be that world where you're like, yeah, I'll trust my AI, but it's got a $200 limit each time it does this, and it doesn't have access to the other numbers until I give it authority. Like, those kind of ththings are going to happen.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Because how quickly, that where we go from that maybe small purchase, of, I don't know, a book or something like that, to an emotive travel purchase.
I mean, when I look at the data that I can give my agent today when I use this personally, it's got all of my travel history and my types of profiles. As long as I'm, you can choose where you want human in the loop. I mean, and I think that's to each individual where you choose that threshold. I don't think that's, depending on a user's comfort level, that is today in many ways. I mean, you can truly use agentic browsing to literally go through any of our booking flows and pretend you're a human with ridiculous accuracy. So that is there today if you want to enable it as a consumer. That's obviously very techy. I think that's going to rapidly push out to more and more people as Microsoft and others build in OpenClaw into the operating systems, or if Hermes becomes more of a, adopted, which one wins, but regardless, it's going to rapidly push.
Juan, is that scary or exciting?
I think it's very exciting. And I think that's the piece you're talking about. Perhaps you start to see a lot of cancel for any reasons developing because of this. You get all the way to the end. You pre-book 10 trips. And then you let the last-minute human supervision to go to the trip they want to, right? Happens a lot in Booking.com. They book 10 hotels, and then they end up canceling 9. So we might get there until we're sure that the LLM has made the right choice, right? But it's exciting times. It's all about data, I think. We're in an infrastructure that's built over decades, right? And I think all the branded first for families, NDC, all of these things are a door opener for personalization. I think the conversation is already something solved. It's about how we feed the LLMs with that information to be able to be ultra-personalized for the end user, connecting with CRMs. It's going to be a problem with countries and how European Union mandates, et cetera, all of that. But I think it's exciting times right now.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. David, one specific AI application that will be table stakes in 24 months' time, and would you have thought that it would have been 6 months ago? So given the rapid pace of development, you think, OK, that will be happening.
Yeah, I think probably that is, at least from our perspective, is how, kind of the service layer. Because we've talked about the booking end of it, but not about the operating, the delivery of the journey. So I think probably expected that to be further advanced. But will definitely be. I certainly see, thinking about automating everything. But when something happens and a human is stranded at an airport, that's going to be really hard to handle. From OpenClaw from your home. So I think there'll still be a human element there, but I would have expected that to sort of maybe come closer, at least from what we're able to deliver.
Tana, what's a concept or a product category or a role or a process that AI will have made genuinely obsolete by 2030?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know if it's obsolete, right? But I think there will be obviously replacements, in terms of it. I view AI not as a replacement in many ways. I view it as a magnifier, and so it's an amplifier for that. So for me, it's not around what it's going to replace. It's how much more I can do with the resources I have. And so that's what we talk about internally on a lot of the projects that we have with our internal AI group, as well as with IAG AI, the innovation across the group. It's a force multiplier.
OK, and I want an answer from each of you on this one. In 5 years' time, which of your 3 organizations is most at risk of being bypassed entirely by an AI agent and books travel without touching any of your platforms, and why? Juan?
Can you repeat? Sorry?
Yeah, in 5 years' time, which of the 3 organizations, so you can say David's or you can say Tana's if you like, most at risk of being bypassed entirely by an AI agent and books travel without touching any of your platforms?
I sense that perhaps some of the workload on TMCs might be given to agents. I think in 5 years, I can confidently say they will be good enough to replace some agents in easy tasks. So it might be just booking end-to-end. That might be a possibility. And I think meta searchers have a really hard time.
People are always talking about the demise of bricks and mortar travel agents, but it seems to be a growth category right now.
They're still there.
Yeah. OK, do you want to make one of these guys disappear?
I think we all have to live in this world. I wouldn't, none of them.
David?
Likelihood. So I'd say least likelihood is airline.
Yeah, agreed.
Operator,
agreed.
obviously.
Supply.
This sits somewhere between us.
OK. All right. Tana, do you have a view?
I mean, I think, when you look back at all this, it's a shift in everything. I think that the way that individuals use this, the same with those brick and mortar travel agents, no matter what, there are always going to be people that, we used to talk about this, when there's Americans going from a Cancun vacation, they want to understand it. They don't necessarily fully trust, even what they read from bloggers. They want somebody who's going to be their guide. And until it gets to that point where you fully can rely on an AI to not hallucinate individual pieces, I think there's still a world where that happens. It might be more niche, but it's still there.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking my panel.